Anybody want to add anything? Okay. A follow-on question with that. How important is spiritual development for gifted children, if at all?
First of all, in some kind, I think it's very important. As I said earlier, I think it's part of a holistic look at your child, and you want to help them develop in other areas. So that maybe I do believe that some children are more spiritually gifted, more sensitive, not just sensitive to pain. I mean, I think that's one type of sensitivity, or suffering. There's some children who are very sensitive to pain and suffering. Some children are more mystical than others. I mean, they're more interested in talking about God and life. And I mean, it's almost like they're gifted in philosophy, if you will. And so if you were to measure, if you were to have some kind of aptitude test, you would find that they had an unusually high interest in aptitude for philosophical thinking. For abstract thinking is what you're really talking about as you get older. It's an abstract kind of thinking. But I think for all gifted children, I mean, one of the big issues is acceptance. And I mean, religions can be very excluding, but there are places that can be very accepting. And one thing that you have in common among many of the religions, and certainly those that are gathered around this table, that would place a high value on accepting people who are different, whether that difference is because they're handicapped in some way, or they're different because they may have great intellectual skills but not very good social skills, or and so I think for your child, to be able to find a place of acceptance for who they are. And I think in many religious traditions, if you get away from the extremes I don't know whether Sikhs have extremes, but I know that certainly Christians do. Extremes, if you get away from the extreme edges, you usually find a teaching of love and acceptance. And your kids need that just like any other kids need that. And they need some categories to think in, even if they later change those. I regret your indoctrination, your forced indoctrination. Christianity has a history sometimes of forced indoctrination. That's what happens with the majority. When you're in the majority, you think everyone should believe like you do. And that's not just true. If you go to a Muslim country, sometimes you have the same thing. If you go to a Hindu country, sometimes, whatever the majority religion is, there's a lot of pressure to be part of that majority religion. But I think there's a lot of acceptance there. And I think you give your child some hooks to hang some of these so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel, in the same way that if they read biology or they read mathematics or they in another area, if they have the interest in these things, and I'm not saying you'd force it on them, but if they have an interest in this at all, it helps them not to have to reinvent the wheel. In the same way that you don't want your scientifically gifted child to have to make every scientific discovery over again. You want them to be able to learn and build upon that. In the same way, I mean, there's a lot of religious and philosophical thinking that's gone over the years, and you don't want them to have to recreate all that, but to read and to think about and to analyze. So I think those who are truly spiritually gifted, that is an interest, that philosophical interest, that abstract thinking kind of interest, that mystical interest.
I think that I think that, Dr. Stanford earlier said that religions come to answer what is the meaning of life and other big questions. And so to be able to raise a child, or to be able to provide a child with access to a place where they can go when they have those questions, as well as a place that provides them, in my mind, not necessarily answers, but only furthers the depth of their questions, is a very good thing. I think not just spiritual development. I think religious education is also very important in that sense, in the sense of formation of community. And you can see the studies that Robert Putnam does about community, or other people. and you can see that the health outcomes of people who are part of communities is better than people who are alone, and all sorts of other sort of very rational scientific medical factors in life about the quality of life of people who are in community. And religions are, we have religious communities. You see people on a regular basis, and you have certain norms and modes of working with each other, and that's a very powerful benefit of not just the spiritual, but the religious education is the community creating that it does.
So kind of one thought on the very couple of questions ago, and I think it's important here. With what is a developed person? What is a spiritually developed person or a child who can see the divine, who whatever he or she says is connected to the divine, and every word that comes out, you said this is divine. And I think for all religions, when you educate, when you go through the path of the religion, the aim is that you're able to become that spiritually developed. So that was in my mind. I wanted to share that. So I think spiritually developed is, again, the goal once you go through a religious education. Now, should we? I think the question was how important, and I think very well touched by Rabbi Rogozin and Pastor Stanford. But it's more important, I think, for gifted children, because these children are going to be, like Chris said, or Alan said, Tom said, they're going to be the leaders. We want them to be well-grounded. We want them to be very mature in their... we don't want to have any, as possible, any areas where, well, they'll find their answers. Even if we're unsuccessful on their table, I think they'll find their answers. But they'll reach for the sky. So we want them, you would like as parents, that they get that development. Because the ultimate, in our verses, in our, there's one verse that says, Gyan khand mein gyan prachand. In all the knowledges of the world, the supreme knowledge is the utmost knowledge. And if you don't get there, then all the knowledge of this world, you will not be able to answer, the question that your being, your purpose, you will not have a clear view of that answer. So therefore, I think spiritual development and I agree religious education as well are important for the development of gifted children.
Thank you, sir. You were me. Go ahead. Okay. So, balance. How hard is it to find balance in your life? That's something I think about in answering this question. I know in my life it's very difficult to find balance. In Loudoun County specifically, it's very difficult to find balance. And in our children's lives, especially if they're gifted and talented, it's going to be very difficult to find balance. There is a push to over-programming, and with gifted and talented children, there's especially this sense of being overachievement driven. Even if that doesn't come from their parents, it comes from themselves. And this sense of even needing to get to the point of perfection that can creep in and be a huge part of their lives. It's very hard for them to find some other way to be in the world than to be overachievement driven and to be directed towards those things that they are so very good at. So religious community can provide a space where they can find balance. Just the act of coming together for the purpose of reflective thinking or contemplation, or to be with one another and do something for the act of social justice, for changing the world. It's a completely different experience in their lives, and it provides them with some balance. I'm also aware that gifted children are oftentimes dealing with emotional realities that are far beyond what they're ready to deal with in their age. I was talking to our religious education director who had a very gifted and talented son who grew up in this area. He was reading at a level that was so far beyond what he could wrestle with emotionally that he came to her one day after reading a book that most adults probably wouldn't even pick up and said, I'm going to die, and there's no meaning to life, and I'm in 4th grade. That's what he was able to put forward, and there's something that's something very difficult to respond to. I believe that a religious community can be a beautiful response to that question in and of itself, which is to embrace a child in a tradition, to embrace them in a place that allows them to question and allows them to express, and where they can hear other people, whether they're in that same age group or other ages, expressing very similar things and also coming up with their answers.
When you say religious education, do you mean gaining knowledge about different religions, or you mean going to a religious institution and to be I don't like to use the word indoctrination, but a lot of the time it's never really letting the group questioning the preacher really. Are you talking about that, or are you talking about gaining knowledge about different paths to spirituality? Right?
If I can put you on hold for just a minute,
Okay.